Donald Trump and some kind of history of organized crime ties? Is that even possible? And before you freak out, relax. Let's talk about this for a moment. In this week's chapter of One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb, which I've been reviewing for a while now, we're going to break into the allegations that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, could have ties to organized crime. I didn't say it. Whitney Webb said it, and other people. But the point being is we're going to dive into that. The devil is in the details. Let's go into chapter 6 now and check out what it says. And before you completely freak out about the idea that, oh my gosh, devil's advocates, would you please not call Donald Trump an organized crime figure? No, I didn't. Reading, listening, comprehension skills is the most important thing that you need to work on right now. If you thought that I just said that, what I'm saying is Whitney Webb in the book, chapter 4, where we're talking about Roy Cohn and his history, is going to tie into allegations that Donald Trump has ties to organized crime. That is something that's posited by the book. We at Devil's Advocates look into all of the allegations and say, look, let's just talk about it. Does it inform us into how things may have progressed? If you, for example, think that this is a liberal versus Democrat issue, if you think Donald Trump, for example, is a man of God and I just attacked a man of God, if you, by the way, check out and regard and do not look into anything about a person because you think somehow they're beyond reproach, then this is not the channel for you. We are going to question things. And let me make sure that you're clear about this. I'm not Republican. I'm not Democrat. I'm not political. I call out both sides. I call out corruption. That's my thing. I call it corruption. And again, I didn't just say Donald Trump is corrupt. What I'm saying is we're reading a book together. One Nation Under Blackmail, chapter 4. Now, I'm going to pull it up on screen for you to take a look at. And hopefully that you can, with that caveat, you can just relax a little bit. I think I like this view slightly better. Like that makes much of a difference. One Nation Under Blackmail is the book that we're talking about. We're going to jump ahead right into chapter 4, Roy Cohn's Favor Bank. That's the chapter we're focusing on right now. And hopefully I'll get to the point where I realize where I stopped reading. I'm always planned for about an hour on these episodes. We're reading word for word from the chapter in many places. The yellow highlights is word for word, and I'm going to read it to you, but I also stop. I stop in there and I provide you details and comments and point out to you what I saw in there. There's large sections where we're going to have to skip over. And so the bridge work, the names of individuals who knew who and who knew where and what, and all those fucking details, those are sometimes going to be like, you're just going to have to let me summarize. If you want to get all of the nitty-gritty details and all of the facts, you're going to have to buy a copy of this book yourself. By the way, I'm going to drop an affiliate link in this video where you can get a copy of the book, One Nation Under Blackmail, that we're reviewing, and read it for yourself word for word, including all the sections that I'm going to drop out. Please buy that through my affiliate link if you're willing. I get a little spiff for it. I have a minimum requirement of books I have to sell to keep an affiliate link program going. So if you could buy a copy of that book, it's great. And yes, I think no matter what version of the book you buy it in, whether it's Audible or whether it's Kindle version or whether it's a hard copy book, I will get a little bit of a spiff for doing that. And it doesn't cost you a dime extra. So buy it, please, through my affiliate link. Let's get into the book right now. And again, I encourage you to read the book for yourself. Buy the book for yourself. The author, in my opinion, deserves credit for the book that they wrote. So don't just take the free ride from me and actually buy a copy of the book. That'd be great for them and also helps the channel out. All right. We're talking now about Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn, whose public reputation ranged from boy wonder to sleazy mob lawyer over the course of his lifetime, was one of the most influential political operators in the country for the better part of 3 decades. 3 decades in this country, Roy Cohn was a major figure. That's the part that we need. Again, I ask you to focus on high-level details. Don't get lost in the weeds on these chapters, which are very, very, very weedy, if you will. We're just looking at high-level stuff. For 3 decades, this person was a major influential political operator. Not only would he serve as Joseph McCarthy's right-hand man during the height of the Red Scare, that's when McCarthyism was going after communism in America. It was a major thing. Roy Cohn was a major political operator in the country during the Joseph McCarthy's right-hand man, or during the height of that Red Scare. He would also help secure electoral victories for prominent politicians in New York and beyond, including for U.S. presidents. Years after his death, Cohn's protege, New York's real estate billionaire Donald Trump, would serve as the 45th president of the United States. So there you go. Right off the bat, let me repeat that. Years after his death, Cohn's protege, New York real estate billionaire Donald Trump, would serve as the 45th president of the United States. So this book is going to make it a connection between Roy Cohn, who we're going to learn a lot about in this chapter, and Donald Trump. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I am not political, so I'm not saying, oh, those Republicans are horrible. Let's talk about how Donald Trump's involved with true crime, or not true crime, organized crime. I'm a true crime channel. That's where I got conflated there. But the point being is that pocket your attitude, pocket your, like, that man is above reproach. We're just reading a book. Yet for someone who was so influential, both his admirers and detractors have declined to dig too deeply into his career and dealings, particularly those that are not most unsavory. So this guy, Roy Cohn, seems to avoid people wanting to dig too deeply into his past, because I would argue, we've already seen, when people dig into certain families in this country, they tend to have accidents, and they have unfortunate accidents, like slitting their own throat by accident or whatever the case may be. You get what I'm saying? Some people who dig into certain people in this country and their ties into organized crime end up dead when they ask too many questions. So journalists don't write a lot about these individuals. Hence, a book like Whitney Webb will be criticized as, well, she doesn't have a lot of facts behind her, because there aren't a lot of facts, because people end up dead if they dig into the facts. Part of this we may owe to Cohn's apparent contradictory nature. He was an anti-communist crusader that closely collaborated with the FBI, as well as a close confidant, business associate, and legal counsel to some of the biggest names in organized crime. So while he's helping the president during the Red Scare, fighting communism, he was big into anti-communism and also in bed with the mob, is what they're basically trying to say. And again, all through this book, you'll see these political figures who seem to be best friends with mobsters. Is it just dinner companions or business? Now, perhaps for some reason, Cohn's story is central when detailing the rise of the networks that are the focus of this book. Cohn's story is central when detailing the rise of networks that are the focus of this book. Now, ultimately, this book is going to lead us to things like Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is going to lead us to Charlie Kirk and the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk was pushing for the Epstein files to be released. And this book would make an argument, although, as I pointed out, every single chapter I think I've done with this book, Charlie Kirk was not assassinated by the time this book was written. This book was out before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. But the Epstein connection to Charlie Kirk cannot be overlooked. And this book informs us about that Jeffrey Epstein connection. So that's why we're looking into it. That's why I picked this book for the case that I'm following on Tyler Robinson being the alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk. Hope you follow all that. All right. So, Roy Cohn was a man once called New York City's preeminent manipulator. Roy Cohn was a man once called New York City's preeminent manipulator, precisely because he was a one-man network of contacts that have reached into City Hall, the mob, the press, the Archdiocese, Catholic Church, the disco jet set, the courts, and the back rooms of the Bronx and Brooklyn, where judges are made and political contributions are arranged. Roy Cohn was big in all of those areas. In, again, one-man network, and tied into government, the mob, the church, everything. Judges and political contributions have been arranged through Roy Cohn. And that's what we're going to talk about in this chapter, is how he literally made judges in this country. He literally was in bed with the mob. He literally made presidents, if you want to go that far. In addition, Cohn's ability to manipulate the press, politics, and much more may have been partially due to his ability to wield blackmail in a way similar to that practiced by his close associate and friend, J. Edgar Hoover. Full stop. This book, called One Nation Under Blackmail, we've already covered for many, many chapters how J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailed by private sex parties and got blackmailed, and basically had the FBI looking the other way on organized crime because they had dirt on the director of the FBI for a long period of time. So we're following that theme, that our government's Federal Bureau of Investigation was compromised a long time ago, and the mob never has let go of their control of our government, is essentially where it's going. This particular relationship, aspects of which were discussed in chapter 2, so we already covered that, I've already covered it, may explain why, long after Cohn's death in 1986, so now we're starting to get closer and closer to today, After his death in 1986, much of the FBI file on Cohn, believed to be over 4,000 pages long in total, has still not been made publicly available despite efforts by Cohn's biographers and others over the year. People have asked, historians, authors have asked for details, FOIA information requests about Cohn's life. Over 4,000 pages in total of his life is still being hidden and controlled because they don't want authors digging into who Roy Cohn knew, who he was in bed with, and how it relates to modern day politics. That's what I would say. We are still hiding the history, the true history of Roy Cohn, because people don't want in our government to dig too deeply. And historians and good researchers, people who can connect the dots once they see them, they don't want you to see the dots, so they don't release that stuff. Why else? Playing devil's advocates. Why else would they not release it? What are they hiding? They're hiding something. Now, Roy Cohn's father was Albert Cohn. So we're going to talk about Al Cohn or Albert Cohn. Albert or Al Cohn sought to become a judge. So he wanted to become a judge, but lacked the money that was necessary to secure such a position. This was because the party, the Democratic Party, required payments from the men it put in on the ballot as a form of fundraising. And the more influential the position, the more money was required. So if you want to be a judge, you have to stump for money and get people to give money, and you need to give that money to the party, in this case, the Democratic Party. And if you gave them enough money, if you gave the Democratic Party enough money, they would then endorse you and put you on the ballot as their pick for whatever position you're running for. That's the way politics works in America. Every president, in my opinion, does that. Every president basically goes out and has to campaign and fundraise and get to the point where their party, be it Republicans or Democrats, say, okay, you've raised enough money for us that we will officially endorse you as our candidate. Line our pockets and we'll endorse you as our candidate. That's how things work. It's complex, but that's how it works at the end of the day, in my opinion. Now, around the time that Al Cohn had gone as far as he could without having the money required for the judgeship he coveted. So Al Cohn tried to raise money and couldn't get there. So around the time that Al Cohn had gone as far as he could without having the money required for the judgeship he coveted, he met Dora Marcus, the daughter of a wealthy banking family. This is where we get into banks. Let me repeat this. This is from a previous chapter. Banks, mobsters, government. Banks, mobsters, government. Can you tell the difference? These guys are all the same people running the banks, the mob, and the government. So at the time that he's trying to raise money to become a judge in this country, he meets Dora Marcus, the daughter of a wealthy banking family. According to friends of Al Cohn and members of the Marcus family, the relationship between Cohn and Dora Marcus quickly led to an arranged marriage, as Dora was the ugly duckling daughter that they couldn't marry off. So Dora, according to this, wasn't attractive, and the rich family bankers wanted their daughter married off, and so what did they do? I'm going to trade my daughter for the judgeship. You want to be a judge? Marry my daughter, tell people that she's pretty, and you can be a judge. Because that's how we work in this country. It's not who you know, it's not who you know. I'm going to not follow that thought through. All right. So how did I just skip past where I was at somehow with my clicking on stuff? All right. So we're right here. Nope, we're right here. Wow. I lost track of where the hell I was. So after their marriage, Al and Dora, so they got married. So these two got married. Why do I missing the part that I talked about the arranged marriage? Somehow I think I deleted that. I think I deleted that highlight. Anyways, after their marriage, so they did end up getting married. Al and Dora argued about where to live, with Al initially winning and securing their place in the Bronx. Al's desire to stay in the Bronx was motivated by his desire to stay connected to the political connections he had developed, where he handled the party's Jewish patronage on behalf of the Bronx party boss, Ed Flynn. Now, why do I do Jewish and make a significant point of Jewish? Because again, a lot of this book is talking about Jewish bankers. Banking and Jews, by the way, were a major problem in the World War II era, where Hitler allegedly blamed Jewish bankers on ruining his country and basically said, it's the damn Jews that own everything. We need to kick them out of our country and take our banking system back. That was Hitler's bitch. He blamed everything, their problems, on the Jewish bankers. Now we have a book where it's talking about, by the way, Jewish bankers own America. which is a similar problem that Hitler supposedly had. It's more nuanced than that. I'm trying to make an oversimplification for you. But at the heart of why Hitler had a thing for the Jews wasn't just because he didn't like Jews, it's because he felt that the Jews were taking over the world through the fact that they owned all the banks and they owned all the money. And so he was like, we need to get rid of the Jews. Okay. And I'm not like that. I'm not doing the whole I hate Jews shit. So get that shit out of your mind. I'm trying to make the connections the book is making. Jewish bankers in America, keep that in mind. Now, as a judge, Al Cohn was incredibly loyal to Flynn and the Democratic Party. So again, Ed Flynn was the Democratic Party boss. So as a judge, which by the way, he got that judgeship he wanted by marrying the daughter of a Jewish businessman. As a judge, Al Cohn was incredibly loyal to Flynn as the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party. According to historian Christopher Elias, when the party needed Al, the Democrats needed Al to rule a certain way for a reason, political or personal, he followed through. When they needed his support for a specific candidate, he gave it. When the son of a friend or a fellow Democrat operative killed a young woman in an automobile accident, Al made a late night visit to the police station and straightened it out. So when they need a favor, he comes in and he takes care of it because he's got connections with law enforcement. He's got connections in the law. And so he just fixes it for them. Al's service to the party and to Flynn paid off, with New York Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt appointing Cohn to the Bronx Supreme Court in 1929. So Roosevelt appoints Al Cohn, making him Roosevelt's first judicial appointment. At the time and for years afterwards, Flynn, who was the head of the Democratic Party, was one of Roosevelt's most senior strategists. 8 years later, Albert Cohn was appointed to the state Supreme Court's appellate division. Like many of the networks already explored in this book, the political machine in which Al Cohn was intimately nestled was interwoven with the city's criminal underworld. So again, what we have is Whitney Webb's allegation that these people in governorships, Supreme Court, appellate courts, high up, in bed with presidents, are also in bed with the mob. That's the key high takeaway that you have to make. Some will argue Whitney Webb has no basis for facts, even though her entire book is pointing who knows who and who was seen where and who on the record, with footnotes everywhere where it's documented in history. They all knew each other. They all had dinner parties together. They all knew each other, and she's just connected the dots. But even she said in one of the chapters, it is all highly speculative. It's just, is it a coincidence that they all seem to be bumping into each other at the same time and have business deals that are in the same businesses? Is that just a coincidence? Highly speculative. Good for Whitney, because that way she doesn't die, hopefully. Anyways, some modern day mainstream sources trace the origin of organized crime's influence on New York's Democratic Party to 1931, when Lucky Luciano sent 2 hired guns to intimidate Harry Perry, the co-leader of Manhattan's 2nd Assembly District, demanding that he step down in favor of Albert Marinelli. So the mob, or you might want to say, wanted Marinelli to be in charge, so they asked this other guy to step down, and this was all done through Lucky Luciano, a mobster who hired some guns to threaten people. Again, speculative. All the key takeaway you need to know is that here we've got, again, people in law, high level of law, associated with the mob, and making kings, deciding who's going to be in charge and who's not. However, the same crime syndicate had cozy ties with labor unions. It has long been rumored that the mob and labor unions, Jimmy Hoffa, for example, of the Teamsters, that mob and labor units go hand in hand, and Democrats and labor units go hand in hand. So therefore, Democrats and mob go hand in hand. Oh, I thought you said Trump was involved with the mob. No, I didn't. What I said was politics are involved with the mob is what I really said. What I said is Whitney Webb said there's a connection between the mob and Trump, or alleged it. So anyways, I know I'm off on a side tangent. What I'm trying to say is it's not a Republican versus Democrat shit. Get that out of your head. Remember, I think Trump ran as a Democrat at one point, and then he changed to Republican because he had a better chance of winning, which also tells you politics is a joke. When you just change the political party you run for because you have a better chance of running as D or R, it means that your morals have nothing to do with it. You're not running because you believe in what you say. You run based on what party is going to give you the best chance of winning. People need to figure this shit out. These people often have run as both parties. Whatever happens to give them the best offer at the day is who they're running for. However, The same crime syndicate had cozy ties with labor unions, a key component of the Democratic Party's power base going back to the 1920s, an arrangement for which mobster Arnold Rothstein is credited. Similarly, Marinelli's ties to the mob also dated back to the 1920s when he owned a trucking company that Lucky Luciano managed during the Prohibition era. Luciano had been responsible for helping Marinelli become the first Italian-American district leader in Tammany Hall. Well before the incident with Perry, which speaks to organized crime's earlier influence over New York politics through Tammany. Again, you don't need to memorize all these names. It's the high-level stuff, and maybe you sound a little it sounds a little tedious listening to me rant about stuff that I keep telling you. You don't need to know the details. The devil is in the details. Yes, buy a copy of the book if you want to get into the details and take a test on it. I'm not asking you to take a test. I'm asking you to just pay attention to the high-level shit, and hopefully by the time we get to Jeffrey Epstein and Charlie Kirk, you're like, oh, I can't tell you how it happened, but I feel like that's exactly how it happened. All right. The influence of the National Crime Syndicate on top New York politicians was considerable at the time when Albert Cohn was deeply involved in the Democratic affairs. For instance, Meyer Lansky, I keep saying Meyer. Yeah, it's Meyer Lansky. Meyer Lansky is known to have donated to the political. I got to fix that little overlay that's on there. Donated to the political campaigns of Al Smith, the governor for New York, for much of the 1920s. Smith was a top figure for Tammany Hall, the political powerhouse of New York Democratic politics that controlled the Democratic Party nominations and became synonymous with corruption. During the now infamous effort of the National Crime Syndicate to rig the Democratic National Convention in 1932 in favor of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, so the mob, the crime syndicate, the mob, is trying to rig the Democratic National Convention to elect Roosevelt. It was a tearful Al Smith who had personally warned Luciano, Lansky, and Costello that Roosevelt would betray them. So the mob wants to get a guy into the office, and this guy, Cohn, is saying, by the way, he's going to turn on you. He's going to turn on the mob. You're going to put him in office, but he's going to turn on you. Smith specifically warned that Roosevelt would break his promise to restrain an official inquiry into criminal activity in New York City, a promise that Roosevelt had made to appease organized criminal interests in order to secure his nomination. Please understand the high-level thing that's happening here. The mob is literally trying to support Roosevelt's rise into the office of the president. In order to do that, to help him be the president, it's like, look the other way on organized crime. The mob, organized crime, will help you become president if you look the other way and you're soft on organized crime. Okay, I'll do that for you. Although this person's saying, by the way, I have reason to believe Roosevelt's going to turn on the mob when he gets in office. You're going to put him in office, but he's going to turn on you. This anecdote was relayed separately both by Lansky and Luciano. Smith's warning, which the crime bosses had ignored, turned out to be true, as Roosevelt allowed the inquiry, led by Judge Samuel Seabury, to advance after his nomination was cemented. The inquiry soon exposed extensive criminal activity being conducted by Tammany politicians, leading several top officials to resign. Jimmy Walker, the Tammany-backed mayor of New York City, and Al Smith's own protege, not only resigned as mayor, but fled to Paris to avoid charges. So the mob allegedly put Roosevelt in office, and then he turned on the mob and he went after an investigation, and people had to flee the country to avoid prosecution. Key takeaway. And again, it's not super important necessarily yet for getting to the Epstein stuff, but just keep it. This is all history. It's a history lesson. In 1950, McDonald began investigating Harry Gross, who had been running a multi-million-dollar gambling empire in the city. The investigation into Gross grew rapidly with not Donald Trump. Sorry. The investigation into Gross grew rapidly with Mick Donald discovering a series of other related rackets through the city. So in 1950, McDonald began investigating Harry Gross. Okay. What McDonald's investigation would reveal, Flynn and Fitzpatrick knew, was that Mayor O'Dwyer was the front man for a system of citywide corruption that was administered by Moran, the mayor's closest political associate. A lot of names are going by, and we didn't read the bridge work, so just do your best. The key questions are coming up, and you have to hear the names. The key things will come up. If you need to know exactly who they are and where they come up, read the book. Read a book. As Truman appointed O'Dwyer to be ambassador to Mexico, which allowed O'Dwyer to avoid charges and further scrutiny. So, by the way, O'Dwyer was under investigation in the United States for things going on, and so a president appointed him ambassador to Mexico and got him out of the country as an ambassador to Mexico for the U.S. to avoid scrutiny in the U.S. That seems ironic. Though O'Dwyer had escaped from McDonald's investigation, he was forced to return to the U.S. from Mexico City to testify before the Kefauver Committee. We talked about that in the previous chapter, the Kefauver Committee. So, O'Dwyer was under investigation in the United States. He was appointed ambassador to Mexico and shipped out of the country to avoid testifying. But then he had to come back and he had to testify for the Kefauver Committee on his alleged dealings with organized crime in 1951. During his testimony, he did not deny having visited Frank Costello's home in 1941, a mobster. He also admitted that he had appointed the friends and relatives of powerful mobsters to public offices, and became evasive when asked about how much he had known about their ties to organized crime at the time. So this guy is coming back and he's having to testify. Yeah, I happen to know a lot of mobsters and I've helped appoint mobsters to office, but I'm not going to come outright and say I knew they were mobsters. Those people who are mobsters, and I did appoint them, but did I know they were mobsters? I'm going to be kind of sketchy about whether I knew they were mobsters. A subsequent report issued by the committee stated that during Mr. O'Dwyer's term of office as district attorney of Kings County between 1940 and 1942, and his accompanying of the mayoralty from 1946 to 1950, neither he nor his appointees took any effective action against top echelons of the gambling, narcotic, waterfront murder, or bookmarking rackets. So when these guys are in office, they're not going after any organized crime. They're not going after gambling, narcotics, waterfront murder, bookmaking rackets, etc. While this time as mayor has contributed to the growth of organized crime. So when you're not looking into organized crime, guess what? Organized crime grows. Contributed to the growth of organized crime and racketeering and gangsterism in New York City. Less than a year later, O'Dwyer's right-hand man, James Moran, was convicted on 23 counts of extortion for his role in the corruption McDonald had exposed. Where are we going with all this? Again, it's just high-level shit. People in high levels of law are in bed with mobsters and even getting indicted and convicted on 23 counts of extortion for their roles in corruption with the mobs for that. So again, our law enforcement officials, our judicial officials are in bed with the mob, and even if you have the right people in the office, will go to jail for it. But we seem to keep acting like it's not happening still. And I would say it's still happening. Young Roy Cohn had been considerably involved with and worked with O'Dwyer's election campaign, bragging that he had been the one who had found dirt on O'Dwyer's Republican challenger. The mob connections and the use of dirt and blackmail in politics is something that would later define much of Roy Cohn's career and ultimately his legacy. So, yes, these guys all work with the mob. They get dirt on each other. They blackmail each other. All of our politics, I would argue, I would argue, have a bunch of mobsters that are basically blackmailing each other and controlling each other and buying each other judgeships and even presidencies and governorships as they try to play this game of blackmail and who do we own. That's the way American politics allegedly works by people like Whitney Webb, an investigative journalist who writes a book on One Nation Under Blackmail, how our entire government is blackmailed and is in debt to banking systems, mobsters, and so on. In addition to Proskauer's own apparent conflicts of interest, there is the added fact that Joseph Marcus had promised Albert Cohn a judgeship in exchange for his marrying his daughter Dora. We talked about that earlier, which further reveals the influence of the Marcus family within legal and judicial circles, as well as the politicians who appointed judges in New York during this period. Now we're going to skip ahead a little bit. The superintendent of banks. We're going to talk a lot about, I think we're going to be talking a lot about the Bank of the United States. So it is. The superintendent of banks, Joseph Broderick, attempted to work with Wall Street's leading bankers to rescue the bank on December 11th, 1930, but failed to reach any solution. The governor of New York at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, ordered the Bank of the United States. That's why I said we're going to be talking about the Bank of the United States. The governor of New York at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, ordered the Bank of the United States closed, which made its failure the largest in U.S. history at the time. An investigation was launched, and the evidence of fraud quickly piled up. So, bottom line, the government, under some people of government, are investigating a bank called the Bank of the United States for fraud. and mob connections. As the investigation began, it became readily apparent that Bernard Marcus and Saul Singer, the bank's vice president, had engaged in illegal activity, including purchasing the bank's stock with depositor funds in order to drive up the stock price. By the way, manipulating of stock is something all kinds of major corporations do, manipulating the stock. In the Luigi Mangione case, Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, for example, was under investigation by the Department of Justice just recently, just last year, for them manipulating stock prices, for knowing that they were under investigation by the Department of Justice for antitrust violations, and yet selling off their personal stock while the price was high to avoid the big dump that was going to happen when it was revealed that they're under investigation. The point being is that this shit is not old-time politics. This is current politics. This is the way things work in this country. Bankers and big businesses manipulating stock through illegal activity. This particular investigation back in this day led to some convictions, but it still happens. And I know it's confusing, so hopefully you're still listening. Not only that, but they loaned out over $37 million under suspicious circumstances, including $10 million in mostly unsecured loans to bank directors and their companies, as well as $5.5 million in loans to 16 insolvent subsidiaries of the bank in the months leading up to its collapse. Marcus and Singer also raided the bank's reserve to finance their own investments in the real estate market. So when the banking industry, when this particular bank is going under and they're being investigated, they start selling off and buying real estate and other things and moving their assets, moving their money because they know that they're about to fold, so they move their money and buy off other things. And those people will be celebrated as good businessmen who just made good real estate charges now, when they're really, all they're doing is they're just moving the money because this one's going under. This particular corrupt thing is going under. Public hearings revealed that 2 months before the bank shut down, officers at the bank had burned a truckload of documents, more than 1,000 bundles of paper of bank records at an incinerator located at the Bursford Apartments, which was owned by a subsidiary of the Bank of the United States. Marcus, in a style that would later be exemplified by his nephew Roy Cohn, fought the investigation of his bank bitterly, even going so far as to refuse to testify and to seek the removal of the lead investigator of the case. Both Marcus and Singer were found guilty of fraud and were sentenced to 3 years in Sing Sing maximum security prison, and their appeal was unsuccessful. So yes, people will fight tooth and nail to get the convictions that are coming as they're doing illegal, shady shit with the mob. Now, according to members of the Marcus family, including Roy's mother, Dora, according to members of the Marcus family, including Roy's mother, Dora, the reason the other banking chieftains of New York had declined to step in to rescue the Bank of the United States had been anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism. You just don't like Jews. This is a common theme. But wait till you hear more about this. Because again, the Jewish theme, and the reason I highlight it all the time, is because there's a lot of talk about Israel and the United States, their banking relationships, their money relationships, their ties, Zionism, the belief that the United States has to support Israel to become a thing so that Jesus can return, because that's got a religious base that supports that. A lot of things tie into Israel's relationship to the United States and to the banking industry and to the mob. So that's why this book keeps bringing these things up. It's not because nobody hates Jews. It's because anti-Semitism was blamed. This bank's failing because of anti-Semitism. You just don't like Jews. It's freaking Hitler all over again. You just don't like Jews. You're trying to shut down this bank because of Jews. Not because they're a bunch of mobsters, because you just don't like Jews. That's what we do in this country. Blame shift it to something else and make it look like it's something that's not. Per this theory, the Episcopalian J.P. Morgan, probably heard of that company, J.P. Morgan, the Anglo-Saxon dominated New York clearinghouse, and the German Jewish bankers, for example, the Kuhns, Lobes, and Lehmans, had let the Russian Jewish bankers fail when they could have saved their bank. Dora Marcus referred to these figures as a dirty anti-Semitic cabal. You just don't like Jews, that sought to destroy her family due to their Russian Jewish origins. Other banks, however, have been allowed to fail throughout the U.S. history, and anti-Semitism was not blamed for these occurrences. In addition, the German Jewish banking establishment was in part dominated by another powerful family, the Warburgs. While both Felix and Paul Warburg having married into another German Jewish banking family, the Lobes, in June 1930, just months before the collapse of the Marcus-owned bank, Albert Cohn, Bernard Marcus's brother-in-law, was also the guest of honor at a luncheon hosted by Felix Warburg, suggesting that this alleged hatred held by the German Jewish banking establishment for the Russian Jewish Marcus family did not exist at the time. What is that saying? What is the law? All of that reading, what is that to say? The idea that people don't like the Jews and this is some kind of Russian thing, German thing, anti-Jew shit is bullshit. They're all friends. That shit about the Jews and all that stuff like that is basically a smokescreen. And in fact, what you'll find out is the people who got abused the most by the Jewish bank were Jews themselves. That's the irony of this. You just don't like Jews, but it's the Jews who are abusing the Jews themselves. Watch this. It is perhaps more likely that either the fraud of the Bank of the United States was too enormous or the German Jewish banking establishment was disgruntled that such a massive fraud had been perpetrated by a Jewish-owned bank against mostly Jewish depositors. Let me make sure you read that, or we read that again. They were disgruntled that such a massive fraud had been perpetrated by a Jewish-owned bank against mostly Jewish depositors. After all, the bank sought to target the Jewish immigrant community through deceptive means from its inception, and subsequently committed fraud to rob mostly Jewish immigrants of their money. So a Jewish bank is basically a Jewish bank is taking advantage of Jewish immigrants and then saying, you just don't like the Jews, that's why you're shutting down our bank. Your Jewish bank is targeting Jews and abusing the Jewish people for your profit, and then saying, oh, our bank's getting shut down because you don't like Jews. For example, the bank deliberately advertised its services to the Jewish community in Jewish newspapers and magazines less than a year before its failure, at a time when its executives had been engaged in fraudulent activity. So again, the bank is committing crimes against Jews and then saying, you just don't like Jews, that's why you're shutting our bank down. But you're the one committing crimes against the Jews. And I hate, FYI, I hate the term Jews. As a little side rant, I'm highly, highly educated in matters of the Bible. And Jews is a term that is really, really bothersome to me. And I don't want to go on a huge rant, but again, it's hard for me to keep saying the word Jew because people don't even understand what a Jew is. But that's a story for another day. So I just want you to know that when I keep saying Jews, and if you hear a little edge to my voice, it's because that shit, I'm educated in that shit, and it just bothers me that we've become brainwashed as a people into what Jews mean in the first place. And people don't even know what Jews mean in the first place. But anyways, Lionel's influence grew and peaked in the early 1950s when it became the world's largest toy manufacturer. So you may have heard of Lionel's trains. So Lionel's influence grew and peaked in the early 50s when it became the world's largest toy manufacturer. Its glory days faded relatively quickly, and by the end of a decade, Cohen and his son Lawrence stepped away from the company, selling their shares to none other than Roy Cohn. So there's a Cohen family in here and a Cohn family, C-O-H-N. Cohn's involvement with and role at the company would subsequently be linked to suspect financial activity and organized crime networks. Friends of Cohn's, including former Congressman Neil Gallagher, have alleged that Roy persuaded friends and acquaintances to buy Lionel stock while he privately shorted the firm, resulting in Cohn getting rich while those who had invested at his behest took a financial beating. What does that mean? People who know Roy Cohn said he went in and drove Roy Cohn's the Lionel stock prices down, sabotaging the company and their stock and driving their stock down, and then having his friends buy up the stock when it's at a low price so that when it goes back up and he stops sabotaging their stock, they can all make filthy rich money. That also is shit that we do in this country. That is shit that anyone does in this country if they're in power positions and know how to manipulate stock prices. We're not altruistic. We don't do shit for good reasons. We do shit to make people money in this country. It's capitalistic society. It's what we do. Cohn also sidestepped federal regulation in the 1950s by borrowing large sums from the U.S. and foreign sources to buy Lionel stock. So taxpayers, is that what it means? Taxpayers help foot buying stocks in Lionel stock that Roy helped sabotage their stock prices so that we could buy a crap ton of their stock prices and then stop sabotaging their stock prices so we can make money when it goes back up. You buy low, sell high. That's the way things work. And by the way, stock manipulation is a whole monster in itself. Watch who shorts things like airlines before an airline accident. Watch who shorts companies that are about to lose their ass before they lose their ass. And then watch who makes money when they rebound. that kind of shit, follow the money, is a subject coming up for some future topic on the Deep Devils, which is a show that myself and Joe or JJ from State of the Deep do on Sundays now, which is deep dives into things and talk about the banking industry and things like follow the money and shorting stock and that kind of stuff. That we get more deep into that on the Deep Devils show. Now, at the time, Cohn had already become enmeshed in business interests tied to mob figures such as Mo Dalitz and Tony Salerno. And this, I think this is the last section we're going to read before today's thing wraps up. By the time he was 12, for example, and this is talking about Roy Cohn as a young man. So we've talked about Roy as an older man. We're going to go jump back to Roy Cohn as a young man. By the time that he was 12, for example, he was using his father's political connection, Al Cohn, to secure men jobs at the post office, collecting a finder's fee. At 12, this kid had the balls at 12, or the temerity, or the business savvy, however you want to call it. At 12, he was like helping men, grown men, get jobs at the post office or whatever the case may be, and then collecting a finder fee. Hey, you want that job as a postmaster general? I can help you get that job, but you're going to have to pay me a little bit. He's doing that shit when he's 12. No wonder people respected him so much. Those who knew him all agree that he felt more comfortable in the presence of powerful businessmen and New York political power brokers than with children his own age. Despite being so different from other children, Roy Cohn developed a few close childhood friends, some of who would dramatically impact his career and trajectory, as well as his later ability to manipulate the media for political gain and for the gain of his clients. So this man, from a young age, was into manipulating people and how can I get one over? How can I make a buck? How can I get something for you so that you can get something for me? And that he did when he was a child. That's crazy shit. Regarding the family's mob ties, Pope Sr. was particularly close to Frank Costello. This is another, we're kind of skipping ahead. So regarding the family's mob ties, Pope Sr. was particularly close to Frank Costello, whom he had known since his earliest days in New York and whom he had shaped the trajectory of his business. Colonial Sand and Stone, by securing the most lucrative city contracts for concrete for Pope's company. The seemingly endless series of sweetheart deals led Colonial to become the largest concrete company in the country and allowed Pope Sr., its head, to become one of the wealthiest legitimate businessmen, legitimate in quotes, legitimate businessmen with intimate organized crime ties. He's a legitimate businessman, but happens to be in bed with all the mobsters and gets his money through legitimate means with mobsters. So close was the tie that Costello, who was the real-life inspiration for Vito Corleone. Listen to this. This guy we're talking about, so close was the tie with that Costello, who himself is the real-life inspiration for Vito Corleone, the Godfather. The main character of the famous Mario Puzo film, The Godfather, was chosen to be Gene Pope Jr.'s actual godfather, and served as the guide, his guide for years. Literally, the mobster who inspired the Godfather movie is this guy. Gene, after a brief stint working in psychological operations for the CIA, got a loan from Costello to construct his own media empire around National Enquirer, the National Enquirer. Gene Pope Jr.'s son, Paul Pope, described Costello, a mobster's, influence on the family as like a guardian angel, his power felt but unseen. The mafioso style deals that brought the Pope family to prominence also became their modus operandi. Through his control of the city's concrete industry and the local Italian immigrant voting bloc through his essential monopoly on Italian language newspapers in New York, Pope was a force that major politicians and any ambitious politician could not afford to ignore. He operated through an elaborate system of quid pro quo. Hey, let me make you a favor. Let me do you an offer. Let me make you an offer you can't refuse. I'll do you a favor, but when I come asking for you, you do me a favor. You capiche? This is how that shit works. This is what The Godfather's all about. This guy did quid pro quo. I do you a favor, you do me a favor. How's my Italian? Not good. All right, let's go on. So he operated through an elaborate system of quid pro quo that was later adopted by Roy Cohn, who called his own version of the system his quote-unquote favor bank. I do you a favor, you do me a favor. As Gene Pope Jr. later said of both his and his father's roles in New York and even national politics, we made deals. That's how judges got to be made. DAs, things like that. That's when you did all of your talking. I mean, I did everything from fixing parking tickets to making judges. to making judges. It was Roy Cohn's oddly cozy relationship with J. Edgar Hoover, however, that was described in Chapter 2, that was the deciding factor in Cohn's appointment as Joe McCarthy's chief counsel during the controversial anti-communist hearings, going after the Red Scare. The position had nearly gone to Robert F. Kennedy, who was a lifelong rival and bitter enemy of Cohn's, with Kennedy attempting to nail Cohn on more than one occasion when he was Attorney General during his brother's presidency. Though Cohn was ruthless and seemingly untouchable, by the way, it's too much history. The assassination of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, all of the Kennedys and mobs. Have you not heard? If you've lived in America, have you not heard the allegations that the mob killed Kennedy, that the mob killed the Kennedys? And here we go again. These families, the Kennedys are involved with the mobs, the Cohns are involved with the mobs, Epstein's are involved with the mobs, on up the food chain. They never stop doing business with each other. It goes on and on and on. But Americans check out. It gets too complex. And I get it. Most of you won't follow this series through because it's just too complex. I get it. Though Cohn was ruthless and seemingly untouchable as McCarthy's counsel, having played a pivotal role in destroying many careers and lives during the parallel Red and Lavender scares, Lavender being like the scare against homosexuals, Red Scare being the scare against communism. So during the parallel Red and Lavender scares, his antics in relation to his work on the committee eventually led to his downfall after he attempted to blackmail the Army in return for preferential treatment for a committee consultant and his rumored lover, David Shine. So his homosexual lover, David Shine, he's trying to get favors. He's trying to blackmail the Army to make sure his partner gets appointed somewhere, and he ends up getting in trouble for it, and it's his downfall when he tries to blackmail the Army. Again, one hand of the government doesn't know what the other hand's doing it, so sometimes they get in trouble. Sometimes they buy people off. It's a game. Notably, shortly after Shine became involved with Cohn and McCarthy, his sister, Renee Shine, married Lester Crown. Crown. Okay, there's a lot of names that are similar. The future mega group member and son of super mob linked Henry Crown, discussed in Chapter 1. So we already discussed these people. Cohn had learned that during a stint in Mexico, Thayer had produced a son with a Mexican woman whom he had briefly married and then divorced. Cohn threatened to inform Thayer's aged mother of this long past affair by shoehorning it into a public confirmation hearing of Charles Bolin, who had been nominated to serve as U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union. Thayer, fearing that the news would greatly distress his elderly mother, chose to resign from the State Department. What is the important key takeaway? We're having confirmation hearings about somebody else, and this guy is just going to happen to sneak into the confirmation hearings of Charles Bolin. Hey, by the way, did you know that so-and-so had an illegitimate son with the Mexican woman in Mexico, cheated on his wife, whatever. And that person's like, I'm just going to resign. Fuck this. I'm out. I don't want my mother to know that I'm a piece of shit and went down there and impregnated a Mexican woman and had an illegitimate son. So I'm just going to step down. That kind of shit, called blackmail in this country, is how we operate. Oh, it would be a shame if your mother found out that you were a piece of shit. I'll just step down. All right. Cohn also likely used blackmail obtained by other means, given that he had already become involved with the Roosevelt-linked sexual blackmail operation during this period. This is going back to Rosenstiel's linked sexual blackmail. This is talking. We had a whole bunch of stuff about the sexual blackmail, the blue rooms, the basically getting blackmail on the FBI director. As discussed in Chapter 2, this operation was allegedly tied to the anti-communist hunt of the period and apparent target homosexual men who also were being hunted due to the so-called Lavender Scare. Ironically, one of the main motives behind the Lavender Scare was the concern that closeted homosexuals were vulnerable to blackmail. And again, this is a time in our country when being a homosexual was a really, really bad thing for you politically. And so today we've moved a little bit into realms where homosexuality isn't going to ruin your career if you're openly homosexual. Now, if you're married to a woman, if you're a male and you're married to a woman and it comes out that you've got a gay lover on the side, that can still ruin your career in this country. But just being homosexual in itself is not a death sentence for your career like it was back then. Though the idea was that communists would use this information to subvert homosexuals in the U.S. government. What is that saying? It means we have homosexual men or women in government, and if the Soviets find out about it, they'll use it and threaten to expose This is the way it works. They will threaten to expose the homosexual relationships of people in Congress, and that will make them susceptible to blackmail. Because our country, by the way, in my little soapbox, our country doesn't really care what you do. They care about what you're afraid people find out about. That's what they're concerned about. That they have people in Congress that are homosexual isn't what bothered them. What bothered them is somebody might be embarrassed and ashamed and feel that they're going to lose their whole life and their political career if their homosexuality comes out. It's not that they are homosexual. It's that they could be blackmailed because their fear of being called a homosexual and having it ruin their career. That's how we do blackmail in this country. The government, in my opinion, the government gives zero fucks what anybody does. They don't care what you do. If you're working for the government, they don't care what you do if you work for the government. What they care about is whether you can be blackmailed because of what you do. That's what they care about. It's not a moral issue. It's are you going to endanger the country because somebody can blackmail you because of what you're embarrassed about? And it doesn't even have to be illegal. It's something you're embarrassed about. Rant over. All right. Though the idea was that communists would use this information to subvert homosexual in the U.S. government, the evidence suggests that it was the specific anti-communist group with which Cohn was directly affiliated who were more apt at blackmailing these men. This group was subversive, given that their top men, homosexuals such as Hoover and Cohn, were entangled with and compromised by organized crime. Organized crime already had the director of the FBI and people like Cohn pegged as homosexuals and had compromising information about them and could ruin their careers, which led those individuals to look the other way on organized crime because they were embarrassed and they're ashamed that their activities were going to come out and ruin their careers and their lives. After all, it had been Hoover's FBI and Catholic Church. It had been Hoover's FBI and the Catholic Church, dominated by Cohn's pal Cardinal Spellman, that had originally backed and legitimized McCarthy and his now infamous witch hunt on communism. And I know it's complex. The key takeaway, all you need to take away from the key takeaway from all of this is that the mob has blackmail on politicians, in particular during this era of embarrassing revelations that you're into homosexuality and that could ruin your career. And so when you own the FBI and the FBI is looking the other way because they're afraid to have their secrets come out, they have blackmail on everybody. And that's what the whole gist of this book is about. One nation under blackmail. The entire government at some point has somebody who has blackmail on you and you're afraid of your career getting ruined. You're in business with mobsters. Mobsters will either make you or break you. They'll bankroll you and put you into the presidency if they want. And if you don't play ball, then they'll ruin you if they want. And the bankers, the mobsters, whatever, are the ones controlling the country. That is kind of the basis of this book. It will lead us to names very shortly, I believe, to the Wexners and the Bronfmans and at Epstein, and even to modern day Charlie Kirk. Sorry, I almost did it again. Did I just almost say no? Don't go there. Anyways, thanks for listening. I know it's much. I know it's very, very, very much. And I'm not a super historian. I'm doing my best to try to walk you through what I see and the points that I think. I'm trying to get in here and bookmark this page before we go too far so that I can find where we left off later. Why is it when I try to bookmark this, the bookmark goes away? I just want to click on the bookmark. For frick's sake, the bookmark. What about the bookmark, though? Anyways, the point being is that I hope that you enjoy this series. There's the bookmark, thank God. Okay, so let me know in a like and a comment that you're following the series still. Tell me if it's getting too much. Some of you are like, oh my gosh, I love this. I've already bought a copy. A lot of you bought a copy of the book. Last appeal for that, by the way, in the links down below is going to be an affiliate link. Again, I get a little commission, not much, but I get a little commission for you buying a book through my link. So if you click on my link and then you decide I want it in Kindle, I want it in audiobook, I want it in whatever, I want a hard copy for my desk, I want to buy 12 copies for my friends and send them out for Christmas gifts, whatever the case may be. If you buy that book, it costs you no more than buying it if you went to Amazon by yourself, but I get a little spiff for it and it helps my channel. So if you like this, like, subscribe, follow me. I cover true crime cases and the books and documentaries and movies that inform the true crime stories that I'm paying attention to. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Devil's Advocates out.